Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Komet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How's it going?
A pretty good Thursday night here. Just, getting ready for the weekend, and fall is in the air, but I think we're still going to have some decent enough weather to watch some soccer this weekend.
It's been a pretty warm fall by Calgary standards, and I'm not complaining because, it's perfect soccer watching temperatures. And this weekend, there's a lot of soccer to watch, so I'm excited to talk to you about it.
And if you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
So our podcast focuses on soccer in Calgary. We talk about the amateur, collegiate, and professional teams and players from the city's soccer community, all the way from grassroots and amateur leagues and teams up to the university and professional level.
This week, we'll talk about Cavalry FC as we usually do, and we'll talk about their match against York United last weekend and their upcoming match against Vancouver FC, which is on Saturday afternoon at Spruce Meadows. We're going to do some updates about the various post-secondary teams here in Calgary, and we also have an interview this week. Who's our interview with, Scott?
Yeah, we interviewed Natalie Girvitz, who is a new center back for the SAIT Trojans women's team. She only joined the SAIT team this fall, but she is pretty established at the post-secondary level. She previously played with the UBC Okanagan Heat for 3 years. So it was good to talk to her about some of the differences between the ACAC and Canada West, her upbringing as a Calgary-based soccer player, as well as kind of her time with SAIT, which, as we've talked about a lot, SAIT is a very successful program. So we talked a little bit about what it's like to play for a team that has really become a powerhouse in their division.
We'll have that in a few minutes, but we're going to start off, as we often do, with Cavalry FC.
Hi, this is Ali Musi, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, well, let's start with a review of last weekend's match. Cavalry went to Toronto and they played York United on Friday evening. Very undermanned squad, but they were able to get a result. They had a 2-0 victory.
Which is really impressive considering they were on the road against a strong York team. And this was a really physical game. So Cavalry made quite the statement, I think, by coming out with the 3 points in this one and getting a clean sheet as well as scoring 2 goals. So, very, very happy night for Cavalry fans, I think.
Yeah, I thought this was one of their most impressive victories when it comes right down to it, because they really were kind of up against it. It was a really important match. They were very undermanned. They really put together a good 90 minutes. And when you watch that match, I was really interested watching it. In that first 15 minutes, they were just flying around there. I don't even think York was even completely ready for that.
No, they did. They came out hot right out the gate. And I was really curious to watch this game because I wanted to see how Cavalry did without Dan Klomp. As we mentioned last week, he missed this game due to yellow card accumulation. And this was the first time that Cavalry has not had Dan Klomp in their starting 11 since 2022. It's been a remarkable run for him. He's played every single minute of every single season in 2023 and up until this point of the 2024 season. So a big loss for the defense, and the fact that they were able to shut up shop and come out with the clean sheet despite not having their talismanic defender. Really good job from them. But you're right in the sense that at the start of this game, it was all Cavalry.
They took the lead relatively early. In the 20th minute, Ali Musi was able to get the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, Ali Musi, another goal from him. He's continued his strong form since returning from injury. This was a little bit of a pinball goal. I think that Toby Warshevsky had a shot cleared off the line by Elijah Adkubi, former Cavalry guy. And then it was hit off of him again, I think, by Musi, or it might have been Warshevsky a second time. He was kind of able to shovel the ball over the line to get the goal for Cavalry and kick things off. And that's how the two teams went into the halftime break, with Cavalry up 1-0.
And the second goal of the match was in the 62nd minute, and that was a fun one by Sergio Camargo.
A decent tap in from Camargo. No, it was I don't even know if he was 45 or 50 yards out. He was closer to the halfway line than to York's 18-yard box, but he spotted a goalkeeper off his line and managed to to chip him from distance. It was really impressive from him.
Definitely. And then as far as defensive performances, I think you alluded to this earlier without Dan Klomp in the lineup. I think a lot of players, really performed well in this match.
Yeah, and I know I gave him a shout out last week, but I think he did commendable once again. The youngster, 18-year-old Michael Harms, playing at fullback. He did not look out of his depth at all. He seems to have shed any nervousness that comes with playing at the professional level. Great performance from him. And that, yeah, like you mentioned, I think this was Callum Montgomery's best game for Cavalry that I can remember for quite a while. And Tom Field, I think he was kind of the heart of defense, right? He was playing at that center back spot that you would usually expect Dan Klomp to be in. Great from the back line for Cavalry. And then the rest of the team did well. I don't know who really stood out in particular, but I thought Nicholas Veiling played better than he maybe has in his first several games for the club. So didn't get on the score sheet, but looked pretty good out there. And overall, it was just a good night for Cavalry FC. Yeah, and Michael Harms actually was profiled by CTV Calgary this past week, and Tommy Wheeldon Jr. mentioned that, how he had a very tough assignment to defend against Guzman, and he did a very good job of preventing a talented player from really influencing the game as much as he probably wanted to. So I can't think of many negatives from this game. Like overall, it was just a good performance from Cavalry, and it doesn't move them up the table significantly. I think they're now in third place, but they did leapfrog York with this win, and I know they're going to be very happy about that.
They were actually even originally announced as having clinched a playoff spot, but I guess the math people at CPL headquarters didn't have it right. But it's all but academic, though, I think, at this point.
Yeah, they even issued a press release that they had mathematically clinched a playoff spot, and they had to kind of come back and say, well, not quite, but they only need 1 point from their remaining 4 matches. So it's pretty much a given at this point that Cavalry fans will once again get to watch their team in the postseason in a couple of weeks.
We have a match coming up this weekend, Saturday at 5 p.m. at Spruce Meadows. Vancouver FC is coming to town.
Yeah, which I think Vancouver FC will be very motivated, right? They're in 5th place, I believe, but you can't help but imagine that Cavalry will feel pretty good coming into this game. I imagine some of their players will be back from injury that they've been missing in recent weeks. I'm not sure the health of the Vancouver FC lineup, but Cavalry has always had, for the most part, strong games and good results against that club.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would just sort of say is that Vancouver FC is going to be a desperate team. They really need to get something out of this match if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive. So I think they're going to be pushing all the chips into the middle of the table on this to try and get something out of this match.
Yeah, and you put a note down here. I didn't actually realize this, but they're in a slump, aren't they? They've lost their last 4 in a row. They've given up a bit of the room that they had in the table over, I believe it's Valor. You're right. They'll be playing with desperation, and you don't really know what that's going to look like, if it's going to translate into a really strong, energetic performance, or if it's going to translate into a really physical, chippy match. It'll be interesting to see how Saturday plays out.
Before we wrap up on Cavalry, a couple player notes that we wanted to mention. I guess the first one is Meyer Bevan. He quietly resurfaced this past weekend with Auckland City in the New Zealand League. He scored. I believe they were playing a match in their equivalent of the Champions League, I think it was. Yeah, Meyer Bevan back on the pitch. Different hemisphere.
Yeah, well, there hasn't been any kind of announcement or press release or anything to say that he's no longer affiliated with Cavalry, but I don't think that fans have been expecting him to come back. Or you've predicted that he was going to show up in the A-League, since Auckland now has a team in Australia's top flight, but looks like he is back in his home city. It's just not playing in the league that we thought that he might be.
Yeah, and this is the club he played at as a youth. Yeah, so I guess, he's back and he's playing, and even though nothing has really been announced, I think we all kind of knew this chapter was closed. Now it's all a done deal.
Yeah, and sorry, I before we move on, I just want to correct myself. I pulled the table up. Vancouver FC is in 6th place at the moment, not in 5th place. 2 points behind Pacific, who's had a little bit of a resurgence.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that update. That's good. And the last Cavalry note here is another former player has resurfaced as well, Lucas Diaz. He's been loaned out to a club in the Portuguese third division. And I'm not even sure the correct pronunciation, but I think the anglicized version would be 1st of December Professional Football Club. Does that sound about right to you, Scott?
I think I'm not, I speak pretty decent Spanish, but I don't know Portuguese. But if I had to guess, it would be Primeiro Decembro Futebol Profissional. Any Portuguese listeners, feel free to correct me on that. But yeah, they're a third division club. I imagine they're based in Lisbon. I think most of that country's pro teams are based in either Lisbon or Porto, two biggest cities. So yeah, good to see that he is back playing. I know he wasn't the most popular Cavalry loan player and he didn't have a ton of success, but he did have some really eye-catching assists when he was with the club. So we know that he is capable of a moment of magic every now and then.
I'm Caden Rogozinski, and this is YYC Soccer Podcast.
So all 4 Calgary esports teams were in action this past weekend. MRU on the men's side had a really successful weekend, getting 2 clean sheets to get them back into the national top 10 ranking. But they're still in 3rd place behind their local rivals, the University of Calgary Dinos.
Yeah, the Dinos had a pretty good weekend themselves. They did win big against University of Fraser Valley, but they did only get a draw against Thompson Rivers. So
yeah, we can cite some strong performances, especially in that 5-0 win from Owen Antoniuk, the Dinos. He's been one of their best players this year. He notched a hat trick and also got an assist. So I watched the highlights for this game, and yeah, he was on fire. So a really strong performance from a recent former podcast guest of ours. But MRU, some big results, including that 1-0 win over the University of Victoria Vikes. They've drawn a lot this season. We've talked about that in the past, but getting 2 clean sheet wins this past weekend, really big for them and their hopes of retaining that Canada West title.
I just want to mention one more thing before we move off this, because Owen Antoniuk, I actually haven't checked the stats, but he's got to be right up there in the Golden Boot race. And when you think about it, over the last how many ever months, with his time at Foothills in League One Alberta and now his time with the Dinos, is there a hotter goal scorer on the prairies right now than him? He's really taken it up a notch and making a pretty good case for himself to, be a U Sports draft pick next year for sure.
Yeah. He's pretty small. So I think that's the main challenge or barrier that he's facing to step up to the pro ranks. But, he's done everything he can to get eyes on him from CPL scouts, and his 2024 has been remarkable. He was League One Alberta's top scorer. He's taken the momentum from the summer season right into U Sports and shown what an important part of the Dinos attack he is. So yeah, if you watch the highlights of this game, it kind of all goes through Owen, right? He gets on the ball, he makes things happen. So great performance from him in that 5-0 win. Here
in Calgary, we've got Crowchild Classic Part 2 on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, Crowchild Classic 2.0. Last time it was a really exciting draw between these two teams, which are both really strong this year. Very exciting to see them take each other on twice in the same season. This time on the Cougars' home pitch. Unfortunately, it is a game that is taking place at exactly the same time as Cavalry's game, so I'm not sure they'll see the same kind of 400, 500 person crowd that we saw a few weekends ago when these two teams took each other on at the Dinos home field. But I'm excited to see who comes out on top in the second version of this year's Crowchild Classic.
Both teams have played pretty well, so they're in good form. So yeah, should be a good match.
Yep, second against third.
Hi, this is Aislinn Phillips, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Let's move on to the women's side, and both the Cougars and the Dinos were in town this weekend playing, and the Dinos they had a couple big wins. They beat Regina 5-0, and then in the matchup first against second in the Prairie Division, that they were able to get the 1-0 victory. So that really vaults them over the Huskies and puts them in first place.
Yeah, Dinos are playing really well this year. They're 5-1. That win over the Huskies was really big and a big statement win for them in terms of their first place aspirations. University of Saskatchewan and MacEwan are hot on their heels, but Dinos seem to have really started well at this halfway point of the 2024 regular season. But on the south side of Crowchild Trail, Mount Royal has not had quite as strong a start to the 2024 season. Of course, they are playing in the Pacific Division this year, which is an added challenge. They had a mixed weekend, losing to UBC Okanagan 2-1 on Friday, but then rebounding to beat Thompson Rivers 2-0 the following day.
Hi, this is Natalie Girvitz, and you're listening to YYC Soccer Podcast.
So now let's move it over to ACAC and SAIT. And this past weekend, SAIT men's and women's teams they played Lethbridge College and Olds College, and the men won and tied, and the women's team won both games. So women's team are still undefeated, 6-0, and the men are, I believe, 3-1-1.
Bit uncharacteristic of the SAIT Trojans men's team to drop points there, but what can you say about this women's SAIT team? I mean, they're such a powerhouse in the ACAC South, have been for a couple of years now, but quite the start, 6-0. I think they've scored 26 goals or something like that. Only have conceded 4, so they're conceding less than 1 goal a game. And, they're taking on Medicine Hat this weekend, and you have to expect they're just going to keep this momentum rolling.
So SAIT's third ranked nationally, and everything is going according to plan right now for this season. And I think they've got to be pretty happy with things. And we wanted to chat with someone about the program this year. So that would lead us into our guest for this week.
Yeah, earlier today, we had a good conversation with Natalie Girvitz, who is from Calgary, but has spent most of her post-secondary career to date at the UBCO Heat. So let's run that interview now and listen to her perspective as she describes what it's been like to join the SAIT Trojans for this successful 2024 campaign. I'd like to welcome Natalie Girvitz to the podcast. Natalie is a center back for the SAIT Trojans, and she was previously with the UBC Okanagan Heat, but she is, I believe, from the Calgary area. Natalie, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you guys.
Course, and we're excited to talk to you about playing for SAIT. But before we talk about the present, we do like to get your background. So, as I mentioned, you are a local player, but can you talk about your upbringing in Calgary and maybe which clubs you played for?
Yeah, for sure. So I originally started at what is now West Hills United, but was Signal Hill at the time, and then I moved over to Blizzards when I was 12, 13 years old, actually with Aislinn Phillips, who I know you guys have recently talked with. We moved over at the same season. From there, I played on the SCO3 team, had quite a few coaches, played ASA, Team Alberta, and then I was on track with huge aspirations to go into the NCAA. And unfortunately, COVID kind of stumped my progress there, but I ended up securing a spot at UBC Okanagan for a couple years, and now I'm at SAIT with the Trojans.
Let's go to the UBC Okanagan part. So how did you end up joining them?
So Craig Smith, the head coach, was quite, and I'm assuming still is, quite good friends with my head coach at the time, Diogo Raposo, and he would come in and do sessions with our team quite frequently. And when my first kind of commitment fell through with a school in Florida, Craig jumped on that and said, "Hey, how would you like to come play for my team?" And I said, "Heck yeah, let's do it." So kind of fell into my lap in a sense, but I think through the connections that Diogo helped me make, that's how I got in that position.
What was your time in Kelowna like for over the 3 years?
It was interesting, to say the least. It was definitely a period of very large self-growth for myself. I learned a lot about myself as a person and a player, and ultimately Kelowna just wasn't the place for me. I can't necessarily say it was one thing in particular. It was a whole lot of factors that just clashed with some part in my life. And it was amazing to be part of that U Sports team. It was a community, and it was a team that's definitely on the upcoming swing here. And I wouldn't change anything that I experienced over there, but it was definitely a time that was hard for me to get through for sure.
Okay, and after 3 years in the Okanagan, you've managed to land back home. You're now playing for SAIT. So how did the opportunity to join the Trojans come up?
Well, I reached out to head coach John back last year. I kind of want to say November, December-ish. And I emailed him and I said, hey, I'm most likely going to be coming home in the next semester and looking for new schooling opportunities at home. Is there a possibility that I can get on this team and, come out for a practice and whatever, have a bit of an informal tryout? And he's like, absolutely, we'd love to have you. And that kind of got the ball rolling. I ended up meeting some of the girls, going to a couple practices, and really fell in love with the culture.
This team right now, like, you're 6-0 and you've dominated the league thus far, and it was kind of the same last year. So why do you think the Trojans have had so much success the last couple of years?
I really think it's because the girls care as much on the field as they do off the field. We really, really strive for, if you're training at 100%, you need to be recovering at 200%. And I think the dynamic between the girls is something that really sets us apart from most programs. I know for me and a bunch of other girls, after our very first session with the team, we already felt like we've been there for a year. And that's something that I've been missing on previous teams. And it was really, really nice and almost refreshing to step into that kind of atmosphere.
We know that you've changed positions, that you used to be a midfielder primarily, but that for the Trojans, you've been mostly playing as a center back. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like to go through a positional change kind of at this stage of your career?
Yeah, for sure. Well, in youth, I mainly played center back. And the reason that I was a center back was because my coaches would always say I can play holding mid from the back. I like to think I'm strong on the offensive transition. So when we first win the ball back, and being able to be a midfielder from the back, being able to see that field is such a different perspective. And it's nice to now be able to step back into that center back position and almost take a little bit of a leadership role on the field, especially being an older player. It's definitely been a bit of a change, instead of having your head always on a swivel and always making sure you see everything 360 degrees, it's now just in front of you. And it's a lot, but it's been a lot of fun.
I was thinking on a team like SAIT, where you probably have a lot of possession in your matches. I mean, you almost get to have that quarterback role where you see the whole field in front of you and you have the ball on your feet quite a bit.
Definitely. One of our coaches, Matt, he's actually John's son. He is always on the defense, especially the center backs. You guys see the whole entire field. Use your voices, direct traffic out there. Make sure people can hear you seeing the field, if that makes sense.
Thus far, SAIT's had a really positive start to the year, the 6-0 start, and I believe ranked third nationally. So, I think the team probably has pretty big goals for the season. But what about for yourself? Like, what about personal goals? Like, are there specific things in your game you're trying to improve or trying to advance your career? Where are you at with that?
So right now I'd say I'm kind of in a bit of a transition period. I went from kind of starting to fall out of love with the game, and I'm really starting to fall in love and rediscover why I spent my entire childhood devoted to this sport. And I think for me personally, I just want to enjoy the game again. And being on this team has really started to help me make that dream possible. And I think the team, obviously, we have aspirations of returning to nationals and finishing what we started last year. But for me personally, I want to enjoy the game again. I really want to keep loving what I'm doing.
And are you going to be at SAIT for 2 years?
Undecided so far. I'm currently jumping back and forth between programs. So at minimum, I'd say 2 years. Maybe the program is 3 years. Maybe it's 4 years. I'm really not sure yet. And that'll all depend on what program I land in.
What area of study or interest are you in?
Well, at UBCO, I took kinesiology. So I'm very large into health sciences and all those things. And, SAIT has a couple really, really interesting programs, one of them being the first responder, the paramedic program. That is definitely something that's always interested me. whether I can actually do that or not, we'll see. I know it's a lot on you mentally, but I think that's always an area that has interested me. So definitely in the health science area, I'd say.
We had a question here, Natalie, about comparisons between ACAC and Canada West. I think we've asked that to every guest we've had on who played in both leagues, because
Yeah.
it's not that common where you have a player who has been in both. So we like to get the perspective of, how do you feel the collegiate level compares with like the university level? Is there as much a difference as some people may think?
Honestly, the biggest difference I can say is just the range of teams that you're playing location wise. Like in ACAC, all the teams are in Alberta. You're taking maybe a 3-hour drive, unless you're driving all the way up to Grand Prairie. In U Sports, you could be driving or having to take a plane. The competition I really see is quite on par. Team levels, although, some of the ACAC teams might not compare to UBC or Trinity Western or whatever, but the competition is still there. I think Canada Soccer has really done an amazing job at starting to increase the women's game, and it's starting to show on many levels now.
And I want to ask, in the off season, if you're playing like at the League One level or AMSL, or if you're going to continue kind of playing at a high level in between ACAC seasons moving forward.
Yeah, I've had opportunities to play for both League One and majors. Last year I turned it down. I wanted to focus a bit more on my work, and I was doing a bunch of grassroots coaching through Blizzards, trying to fall in love with the game again, and I think I achieved that. So we'll see where this summer takes me. I know that SAIT has a summer team that they like to play with, but it'd be amazing to return to that extremely high level and play for League One.
Anything else you want to add in? Any other things you want to mention? Shout outs or anything?
I'll shout out my soccer team and all the SAIT Trojans, and as well as all the people behind the scenes that don't get all the recognition they deserve from the SAIT leadership and administration. So thank you for all that you do, and we couldn't do it without you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Natalie, for coming on again onto our podcast and talking about your experience and your career. We wish you and the Trojans the best of luck as you continue on with this impressive season of yours.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We'd like to thank Natalie for taking the time to do the interview with us. And I liked her perspective and how she sort of compared and contrasted the U Sports game compared to the ACAC game, and just sort of her reigniting her passion for soccer.
Yeah, me too. I really liked how she talked about that and was really honest about how she'd fallen out of love with the game and realized that she needed a change of scenery to kind of reignite that passion. It kind of reminded me of my own kind of journey with soccer and how, I kind of went through something similar, and, it wasn't changing teams that reignited my passion for it. It was this shifting focus and transitioning from being a player to being, a journalist or a podcast host or fan. So, I'm happy for her that she has managed to rekindle that passion, and I'm excited to see, for her sake, how this 2024 season goes. I think, SAIT is the defending ACAC champion, and you really, you shouldn't bet against them repeating that feat. They're just on fire at the moment.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links on our website so you can buy Scott's book online. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media, such as Twitter or Instagram, where our username is YYCSoccer403. Oh, and by the way, Scott, I didn't even tell you, I signed up for Blue Sky this week. So YYC Soccer 403 is now our handle on Blue Sky as well.
Yes, I saw that email. So exciting to keep finding ways to promote the podcast and get the message out there.
Yeah, well, I didn't know much about Blue Sky, but I thought I'd give it a go. And it's actually very, very Twitter-like, except just not quite as many people on it yet. So anyway, that should cover it for this week. Thanks for listening.